Hi, this is Chimes Media and I am James Williams. As many as 656 patients at Gosport War Memorial Hospital in Hampshire are believed to have died from the inappropriate dosing of opiates whilst under the care of Dr Jane Barton in the 1980s and 1990s. At a family forum event held on the 16th of October 2018 at Fernham Hall, Fareham, relatives and loved ones of the victims were addressed by key individuals involved in further investigation of the evidence. This is a full and unedited recording of what was said at the forum. It is in two parts. In the first part are the speeches of the panelists, and in the second part the challenging questions and statements made by relatives of those who were killed. There is a journalistic account along with the sound recordings that can be found on the website chimes.media. Amongst the panellists is the Right Reverend James Jones, the Bishop of Winchester, who chaired the inquiry at Hillsborough, so he's well experienced. William Vinell from the Department of Health and Social Care. Chief Constable Olivia Pinkney of Hampshire Constabulary. And the man who's to lead the investigation, Nick Downing, Assistant Chief Constable from Kent Constabulary.
And a special welcome to those who are here in this gathering for the first time because of the implications of that report. And I want you to know that you've been very much in my thoughts, all of you, over the last 4 months. On behalf of the previous panel and the previous secretariat, I want to say a very big thank you to so many of you who have taken the trouble to write to us, to email, and to send messages of appreciation of all the hard work that was done by my colleagues, both on the panel and in the secretariat. And I want you to know just how important it was for them, my colleagues, to receive that affirmation from you, because it did, in the end, make all their work seem very, very worthwhile. That panel is now the former panel, that secretariat is now the former secretariat, and both have been disbanded. But I have to tell you that many of them feel very much bereft at not being here today, but they have now rightly moved on to different jobs, having completed the work that they were given. But I bring to you today their very best wishes for the future. And I do so especially on behalf of Louise Dominion, whom I know many of you got to know well over the 4 years. And Louise has asked me to express those good wishes to you, which I am delighted to do so for her outstanding leadership of the Secretariat and the Gosport Independent Panel. Back on the 20th of June, I gave you this date publicly, October the 16th, because I and my colleagues then knew, as you were gathering in the cathedral, just what the report contained and the impact that it would have upon you and indeed the whole community. And I was anxious on that day that, having received the information gathered in the report, you would not be left high and dry wondering, well, what now? And so really, literally, out of the air we plucked this date. I thought, well, given about 4 months, that's when we should meet again to see what progress, if any, had been made since the publication of the report. Now, I know that many of you have read the report. Many of you have gone online to view the documents that substantiated our findings, to see that there was indeed an institutionalized regime of shortening hundreds of lives at the Gosport War Memorial Hospital through the excessive prescription and administration of opioids. These lives are your relatives, and I am very mindful of that today. as I report on the progress that has been made since June the 20th. I know just how distressing and how traumatic that information has been for you and for the community, and that's why it's all the more important that we are meeting today, so that in honour of those that you have loved and lost, we can examine just what the implications of the report have been and how those points are now being taken forward. I should say that I'm here today at the request of the Secretary of State for the Department of Health and Social Care. And although I'm here on his behalf, I want you to know, especially as this meeting unfolds, that I remain an independent person. And it is my task, as I see it, as an independent person, to ensure that your questions are heard and your questions are addressed. And that is my pledge to you today. As you will see, I am joined by those sitting in front of you. I'll get them now to introduce themselves more fully, but there's William Vinell from the Department of Health and Social Care, Olivia Pinkney, who is the Chief Constable of Hampshire, and Nick Downing, who is the Assistant Chief Constable on behalf of the Eastern Region. They will speak at more length in a moment, but if I could just ask them to say a few words about themselves as they sit in front of you.
Yes, my name is William Vinell. I'm a director at the Department of Health and Social Care, and I've worked there for 20 years. And one of my responsibilities is to set up and then bring into land at the end inquiries and investigations that are established by the department. And in 2013, after the publication of the Baker Report, I assisted in the setting up of what then became the Gosport Independent Panel. And my role today is to give a bit of brief feedback and information about some of the things the department has started to put in place since June.
Thank you, William.
Thank you, Bishop. I'm Olivia Pinkney. Good morning. I'm the Chief Constable of Hampshire Constabulary and have been for 2.5 years now. And I'm really glad to have been invited. Thank you, because I really wanted to say face-to-face only what I could say in letter to you back in June when the report was published. And I prepared some words which I personally thought really carefully about and read to you about what we have done and what we will be supporting into the future.
And finally, hello everyone, I'm Nick Downing. I'm an Assistant Chief Constable representing the Eastern Region Police Forces. I'm also the Head of Serious Crime for Kent and Essex Police. I've been asked to undertake an independent assessment of the findings of the panel and of the Hampshire Police investigations, and I'll outline some of that when I speak to you in a moment. So thank you.
At the end of today at 1 o'clock, as you leave, my colleagues and I will give you each this pack. And it's an important folder because in it there are individual letters from the General Medical Council, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, Southern Health, the General Pharmaceutical Council, and the Care and Quality Commission. These letters, which are for you, which you will then be able to read at your leisure, these letters report on the actions that these organisations have already taken and are proposing to take in the light of the Gosport Independent Panel report. Now you must make your own judgment on what you read. You must make your own judgment on what you read in these papers. But I do want you to know that as the former chair of the independent panel, I am encouraged by the seriousness with which these different agencies have taken the report of the panel. For example, In the General Medical Council letter, you will discover that in the light of the report, they are now intending to introduce a patient champion role at a senior level in the GMC. They are also seeking Council's advice on whether or not fitness to practice proceedings should be initiated against other doctors named in the report. They are reviewing all their processes of investigation, and they are reviewing too how they treat witnesses and family members who come forward with complaints. The Nursing and Midwifery Council are also reviewing whether further regulatory action is needed concerning other nurses' fitness to practice. And they have already introduced a public support service to support families better. Southern Health are assessing their own practices now in the hospital in the light of the findings of the panel's report, and have already introduced a Speak Up Guardian for those working at the hospital who have any concerns. There's much more in each of these letters to you. As I say, you must read them and form your own judgment about it. But certainly, as one who spent 4 years listening to you and seeing the evidence come forward, I am encouraged that these agencies which are implicated in the report are taking seriously the panel's findings. Now what I'd like to do is to allow those whom you've already heard introduce themselves to speak in slightly more detail about what they wish you to know. And right at the end of everybody's contribution, I will then take questions from the floor. But instead of just taking them one by one, I felt that we could pool all the questions and probably deal with them more efficiently once we'd heard everybody speak. So I've had a word in my ear from Gillian here about whether the microphone is working or not. And I'm going to ask William to say a few words and then stop, and then I'll take a rain check on whether or not you've been able to hear it.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, good. Thank you very much, Bishop, and thank you for inviting me to come here with you today. As I said, my name is William Vinell. I work at the Department of Health and Social Care, and I've been involved from the departmental end in the Gosport panel work since 2013. And the first thing I wanted to say, just to echo what the Bishop said and to underline it, is on behalf of all of our ministers and the Secretary of State, we are very aware of the time that it has taken to get to this stage to get some answers to the questions raised by the events at Gosport. Obviously, we hope that the inquiry's report has started to answer those questions, but we're aware that there is much more still to do. So what I wanted to do was just outline a number of things that the Department of Health has been taking forward since June, and as the Bishop said, there is some more detail about this in your pack. And those four things are, first of all, this forum, secondly, the counselling service, thirdly, the establishment of a data controller and access to information, which I'll say a bit more about, and fourthly, as the Bishop mentioned right at the start, some signposting for some of the new families who have become involved in this exercise since the publication of the report since June. And then lastly, I'll say something about the forthcoming government response to the report. So first of all, this forum. We established this forum because we thought it was the best way, as the Bishop said, of keeping a dialogue and keeping in touch with all of you in a way that is convenient and easy. So this is the first of 4 meetings. We're going to hold all of them down here. They'll be staged over the next several months, up to a year. And obviously the format and the agenda for them is going to be flexible according to the issues that we need to address. We're very grateful that the Bishop is chairing these meetings on behalf of the department, but as he said, he has an independent role. So in a sense, part of his purpose is to hold myself and the department to account for following through on the things that we've said we'd do and the findings in the report. Second thing I wanted to say was about the establishment of a counselling service, which is now available via workplace wellness for people who have been affected by the panel's report. This is either a phone or a face-to-face service. There's a dedicated line to call. Up to 6 one-hour sessions are available. Obviously that's free of charge, and that has been in place since the start of October and is available for you to use. The third thing to say is that I said we've established a data controller who is Christine Gifford, who some of you will know very well and some of you won't. Christine's sitting over there. Now, the purpose of Christine's role, to put it into plain English, is really to hold on to and manage the information that the panel discovered, and in a sense to act as a kind of librarian for the data, but doing that independently of the Department of Health, and that will therefore enable different parties to access the information as necessary, be that the police or be that the regulators, as the Bishop just mentioned. Fourthly, we've had around about 100 new families who've contacted the department since June, asking if their relative may have been affected by the events at Gosport. And of these, about a quarter have been identified as patients who were given opioids without appropriate clinical indication, and the majority of those have now been put in touch with Dr Bill Kirkup, who was the panel's medical advisor. The other 3/4, it was found that either there were no medical records found, there was insufficient information to take a view on opioid prescribing, there was no evidence of opioid use without clinical contraindication, and in a small number of cases, it turned out on examination that the person involved had died elsewhere than Gosport, so they weren't in the scope of this work. The last thing I wanted to say is that we expect to respond as a government to the panel's report fairly shortly. I think there are going to be some obvious but fairly important points that it's likely to cover. The role of listening to patients, which you are all witness to today. The establishment of medical examiners, which is a system to enable a quicker turnaround of examining deaths that need to be looked at more closely in real time rather than having to wait for events like this. And we'll try and point to places where we've already made some changes or where we need to do more, particularly on the themes of safety and checking and the ability of people to speak up easily, which obviously were central themes that ran through the whole of the inquiry's report. So in summary, I hope you find this forum and future forums useful, and obviously we want to know whether this works for you and how we can improve it. We have a counselling service in place. We have a way of managing access to information and signposting for families, and we have a forthcoming government response. So in conclusion, to end where I started, I would like to reiterate our Minister's determination to learn from the events at Gosport and to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Family members, Bishop, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful for this opportunity to speak with you and to say in person what I could only say in writing through letter when the panel published their report back in June. When I joined Hampshire Constabulary 2.5 years ago, this inquiry and all which had led to it was one of the first things that my team briefed me on. At that point, I ensured that we kept good people dedicated from the constabulary's perspective to supporting the Gosport independent panel, providing every single thing that we had. And that's some 100,000 pages, and we did that in as timely a way as was possible. I have a phrase, which I use personally, shaped by a long career in policing, which is that we are transparent even when it hurts. And for me, that has to be a cornerstone of policing, which is a public service with unique powers. And I know and I'm grateful that the panel have acknowledged the full support that the Constabulary has given them in their work over the last 4 years. But I also know there are a lot of questions raised by the panel's findings. There will be an appropriate time for us to answer them, but I have been clear that I'm committed to this review process, and that's undertaken now, and that it should continue with a families first approach in sharing any new information that comes to light, and it is for that reason that I'm not commenting any further in the media until all of this has concluded from the review perspective. Others have said it, but the significance of the findings of the independent Gosport War Memorial Hospital panel in shining the light not just on this case, but more widely in terms of the safety of patients in our health and social care system is very clear. And it is right that today is led and the meeting is called by those with accountability within the health system. So many agencies let you down, and I lead one of these. The independent panel in its report has given a clear view on the quality of the investigations led by the police and other agencies. I accept the panel's findings, and I am grateful for the work conducted by all who were involved. And I admire the resilience of so many families, which has led us to where we are today. Hampshire Constabulary has always acknowledged that our first two police investigations were not of a sufficiently high quality. The report states the panel's view that the third did not go wide enough. The third investigation for us was a major police investigation. We examined the deaths, as you'll know, of 92 people, and we sought independent medical and legal expertise. We sought legal advice on both homicide but also on health and safety offences. We might have pushed harder for the latter with those who advise policing but who also advise prosecuting authorities, but we stopped there. It is a difficult call for any police leader to make, and there has to be a time, of course, to decide when to end an investigation. If we had pushed harder with regard to health and safety legislation, I cannot say with hindsight whether we would have been in a position to continue to widen our investigation. What I do know is that those who conducted that third investigation were professionally profoundly disappointed that no prosecution was brought. But of course, that pales into insignificance when considering your own feelings on that matter. So I would like to take this opportunity again to apologise for our part in the distress to families for so many years. As families of relatives who've died at Gosport War Memorial Hospital, I am so sorry you are in this position. I cannot speak for all the other agencies involved at that time, and of course they must speak for themselves. Looking forward, when the report was published in June, it was my personal decision as Chief Constable whether to ask another police force to lead the assessment of any new evidence for the police to consider, gathered by the panel. I carefully listened to the reported views of families and their representatives and decided that whilst Hampshire Constabulary maintains absolute accountability for this assessment, we must step back. The colleagues who serve with me today wanted to conduct the assessment of any new evidence here in Hampshire to put right what we could. We have the skills and the expertise, and I know we would have done an excellent job, but it was right to seek the support of my peers in the Eastern region, and I am grateful to Assistant Chief Constable Nick Downing for stepping forward. It is a major task. Whilst I do not know Assistant Chief Constable Downing, we've met twice since the report was published, I do know he has the independence, experience and capability to undertake this assessment. But in making this decision, I want to be clear that I would never want to absolve my constabulary of its responsibilities. I remain accountable to you as Chief Constable of Hampshire, but Assistant Chief Constable Downing is independent of me in judgment and action. The fact remains that we cannot hide from the fact that the legacy of what has happened has caused considerable damage to the confidence of many people in the agencies involved at the time, including my own. So I made that decision purely in the hope that families who were affected by events at the hospital have confidence in the process and the police assessment of the panel's findings going forward. And of course, the cost of this work will be funded by Hampshire Constabulary, which is supported by our Police and Crime Commissioner. As you've heard from Bishop James, other agencies are conducting their own assessments at the same time. During the course of the Eastern Region's assessment, if new evidence of police misconduct is identified, then my team will immediately contact the Independent Office for Police Conduct. In June, I wrote to as many of you as I could and explained my force's plans to hand over to a different lead police force, and that I committed to this being progressed as quickly as possible. As we did with the Independent Inquiry Panel, Hampshire Constabulary will cooperate fully with Assistant Chief Constable Downing's team, and you will shortly hear from him with regard to progress. In finishing, I acknowledge and I apologise for the shortcomings in my organisation in the past. Looking forward, we will do all we can to support whatever police action comes next. And I hope today, in some small way, to start the process of repairing your trust and confidence in the Hampshire Constabulary of today, which I am immensely proud to lead.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Nick Downing if he will take the microphone and explain his role into the future.
Thank you, Bishop. First of all, thank you, everyone, for allowing me this opportunity to engage with you and speak with you and outline what actions we're going to be taking. And I'll explain the assessment process as we go through my narrative now and later as I speak to you. Thank you, Bishop, as well, for affording me this opportunity and the invite today. I don't normally start off with an apology, but some of you will ask, well, we've been in place since September 3rd and this is the first engagement, but we had to get all of your details from the independent panel before we could write and get your permission. So this was the first opportunity we've got to engage, and hopefully as we go forward we will engage on regular intervals. What we want to do is take on the mantle from the independent panel around families first. I think that's absolutely important. Listening, engaging, being open and honest with you, and being transparent in everything that we do. We've already spoken to the Bishop, and with your permission we'd like to run some more family forums at 3 monthly intervals, where then we can, in one room, tell you what we've been doing, how we've been doing it, and answer the questions that you may want to ask us. To support that, the Bishop has offered to facilitate that for us, and I think that will be really, really good as an independent advocate. But we're going to draft some terms of reference, and post this meeting we're going to send them out to you and hopefully ask you to shape what you would want at future meetings. We penciled in a date first and foremost of the 16th of January, where at least it's in the diary now, or something to look forward, the next date that would engage you in a wider forum. So the Gosport Independent Panel's report. I wasn't aware of Gosport before the panel's report. I never saw myself standing in front of a room of so many people with eyes on me on what we're going to do from a policing perspective. Hampshire asked the Eastern Region Police Constables to undertake an independent review of the report, and I was then asked to lead. I've got extensive experience of investigation over a long period of time, mainly in the Metropolitan Police Service, and then as Head of Serious Crime for Kent and Essex. And it's all of that experience that I will be using as I undertake this assessment. I don't underestimate in any shape or form the task before me, or that all of your eyes are looking at me for answers. You've lived and breathed this for so many years, and I can't underestimate what that feels like. I can't imagine the pain, suffering, and the seeking the truth that you've been after. I hope that through the work that we will do, and in conducting an independent, effective, prompt assessment of the panel's findings and Hampshire's investigations, we will start shaping what that future may look like. But at the same time, I will always be honest, because I need to be honest. This is the biggest inquiry that I've ever undertaken, and I don't do that naively. I do understand what that means to you. And if I didn't before, looking around this room today, I absolutely do, and will take that forward with me. I call this an assessment, and you might ask why I call this an assessment. The amount of material that the panel have gathered over the last 4 years is unprecedented. There's over 140,000 documents with over 1 million pages of information there. That is going to take us time to look through. It's going to take us time to answer those questions that you want to be answered. I need to know what our next steps will be, and I'm going to outline what those options may be. There is a difference, and there is a major difference between what the panel have gathered as part of the report and what we would require as a police service for investigation and a prosecution. We need to look at evidence, the material and information, and that's why this will take time. We estimate a minimum of 6 months that this will take from an assessment process. The report makes some really damning conclusions, and I've read the report, and I'll be honest, I go on an emotional roller coaster as I read that report. And again, understanding what that means, what that meant to you as individuals, I will never understand. But what I have to do, and what my team have to do, we have to lift ourselves above the report, the information, and we need to look at what the legislation, the legal framework says from a criminal standard, because I'm here from a criminal standard. So some things that we will be looking at from criminal offences, we will be looking at murder, we will be looking at manslaughter, we will be looking at corporate manslaughter, also misconduct in public office, and health and safety offences. That's in our initial assessment. So we'll look at the material, we overlay that on the offences that are there, and understand from our point of view, is there anything new or different that has not been previously submitted to the CPS that is now present? Because we have to understand there were 3 other investigations, material has been submitted. So we have to now look and understand what is different and new. And that's the piece of work we're going to do as well. As part of our assessment, and this work has already started, we're going to be looking at the panel's assessments of the medical records and their findings. We're going to be looking at the panel's experts' findings and conclusions that they make, but also look at the material that sits behind that. And also the experts that we use in the Hampshire investigations. These are key component parts in what we need to do. We've already met with a number of the other agencies. We've met with the CPS, we've met with the Health and Safety Executive, the Nursing Midwifery Council, General Medical Council, and the Department of Health. And we spent a great deal of time with the independent panel and now the transition team to understand all the work and detailed work that they did. And that's really important, and that will help direct us in the future as well. I mentioned what the potential outcomes are from our initial assessment. And I share these with you because I want to be open and honest from this first engagement all the way through my dealings with you. I see potentially 4 outcomes from our assessment. There may be more, but these are the 4 that I see at the current time. There could be a need for further investigation because we identify significant gaps in the material that's been obtained and evidential gaps. So that would require further investigation to do that. It could be as part of the assessment we identify there's a need for further investigation because we believe there's a case for prosecution in relation to those offences, or there may be other offences that are present. It could be that we say that there's no further police action possible, but there will be a need to make recommendations to other agencies or even to government around the law that oversees what happened in Gosport. Or it could be that there's no further police action whatsoever. Now, I don't know, but I just share those with you now because they are the 4 potential outcomes that I can see from our work. We've only been doing this a few weeks. I have no preconceived ideas or outcomes, and I am independent. No one will tell me to not go in any direction. That is my decision on which direction that we go. Chief Constable Pinckney has said she remains accountable, and I will update the Chief Constable. But the Chief Constable in no way is directing the activity that I and my team will undertake. The Department of Health do not direct me, and nor does the independent panel or the transition team. I will listen to you, and I'll engage with you, and hopefully we can have that dialogue as we move forward in the future. At the end of the assessment, when I look at those outcomes, we will meet with relevant stakeholders and we will update you as well and listen to you. Again, I'm not going to say what those outcomes are because I don't know. And there's a wealth of material that we have to go through. Further contact after here, you will be given within the pack, there's details of how you can contact us, an email address that's in there. If you have questions, please ask. We do want to concentrate on the assessment. It is a small team of 20 people at the moment. If you have new material that has not previously been passed to the panel, we'd like to see it. If it's material that has already been passed to the panel in All Hampshire investigations, we're going to have access to that. So everything that comes in, we need to assess. So all that is, if to help us, if it's already been shared, then please don't share it again. That's really important. We do want to engage, but we want to also focus on the assessment process. So the minimum 6 months we will seek to achieve. Also have to remind you that although this room is full, there are other families that have been affected by Gosport. What we will be doing after this today is, one, sharing with them the letter that's within your pack and the information about the Terms of Reference Family Forum. So all I'd ask is that we respect our need to contact them in due course. That will take a few days for them to get that same information. So we want everyone to get the information all at the same time. That's not always possible, as you can see from today. In closing, I just hope that through our engagement and the manner in which we conduct ourselves in an independent, effective, prompt assessment, that we will be able to gain your trust and confidence. I don't underestimate how difficult that's going to be after the journey that you've been from, but that's what I aspire to achieve through the assessment process that we're going to go through. Thank you for your time today, and I will probably answer some questions in a moment.